Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the ROKER RAPPORT podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. You're joining me, Gav, here tonight. It is where we record in the immediate aftermath of Sunderland announcing the sacking of head coach Lee Johnson. Unexpected news, I think, but to talk about it with me this evening is me good friend Martin in Australia. How are we doing?
I'm alright, yes. A little bit bleary-eyed and croaky of voice. First thing in the morning, waking up and scrolling through the Twitter feed and seeing that Johnson's gone came as a bit of a surprise.
And we're also joined by Craig Chapman. Hello.
Yeah, good evening. It's never quiet following this football club, is it? I'm just still trying to wrap my head around what's happened this evening and obviously what's happened at Bolton as well. So yeah, still a bit shocked by it all. But we might touch on the Bolton game. Ultimately, though, that defeat at Bolton, Martin, has left us looking for a new manager because Kyril Louis-Dreyfus, the Sunderland owner, has decided we need to go a different direction, and that Lee Johnson isn't the man to take Sunderland into the Championship. Is it the correct decision to get rid at this stage? Do you think?
It seems a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to me, and I think if anybody had said on Saturday morning that by Sunday night Johnson would be out of a job, you'd have thought they were crazy. So it seems a strange one for Bolton to ultimately be a must-win for Johnson, but it was the manner of the defeat, I think, rather than anything else, that probably sent a few shockwaves through the club. And like we've had a few dodgy away performances before, haven't we? We've obviously had the games at Rotherham and Sheffield Wednesday, then we had the home game against Lincoln as well recently, which there was something not quite right with the performance. But it just seems to have collapsed so suddenly that it's a little bit concerning, I think. Yeah,
concerning, Craig, or can you see where the logic, the thinking has came from with the decision? Because like Martin said, not a great performance by any stretch at Bolton, but this isn't the only incident where Sunderland have gone away somewhere and been trounced.
That's just it, and I think that's why ultimately fans have lost faith in him, and the ownership included in that. And look, I'm one of those who was always Johnson in, but you've got to call what you see, and sadly these sticky patches or streaks, whatever you want to call them, they just become too frequent. And we went into the new year top of the table, rocking and rolling, and look, we've had a desperately poor month, and ultimately that's why he's paid the price. And I had really mixed emotions walking out of Bolton. I left to 4-0, which it's unlike me to leave early, and it was just a funny one because I wanted to be angry, but ultimately I felt ashamed, I felt embarrassed, and I felt like there was genuinely a million ways that I could have spent my Saturday doing something better. But it's funny because even with all that in mind, I didn't think that they'd let him go. And I don't know if for anybody listening, it may have been different where others were sad, but I was on the far left of our fans, and there was just nothing there. There was no chance of Johnson out or anything like that, and no murmurs. And even on the train back, I genuinely didn't hear a thing. And I mean, I don't know, perhaps everyone was as shocked as I was at what they just witnessed. But I mean, like I said, it has still come as a bit of a surprise. So, ultimately, I'm sad to see him go. You never want to see anyone lose the job, and you wish him well for wherever he ends up. But it's very trademark Sunderland.
Yeah, because we were talking about this when we did the Twitter live after the news dropped, that it's like you feel bad in a way for Johnson because he's clearly like a really good guy, like a nice person. I've met him, really down to earth, like nice guy. Like I feel for him in that regard because he so desperately wanted to make it work at Sunderland, and ultimately he hasn't. It was a massive opportunity for him to take over a club as big as this, and yeah, he's lost his job, and I feel bad for him because it's awful when anyone loses their job, really, unless they're doing such a terrible job that it's almost untenable. And I wouldn't say it was untenable with Lee Johnson. I would just say that maybe what we need is someone who isn't as much as a people pleaser, because he's a nice person. He's trying to keep everyone happy. It comes across in his post-match comments when he's coming out after like a 6-0 drubbing, and he's actually excusing it a little bit. And I'm thinking and he was talking about in his post-match, Martin, about how when he went into the dressing room after the game, it was numb. Everybody was quiet, and that disappointed us. I didn't really want to hear that. What I wanted to hear was very little from him. He probably should have kept it short and sweet, and it should have been made clear that it was unacceptable. It was unacceptable. The defending was unacceptable, and that when they got back in the changing rooms, people were calling each other out, and people were having a bit of a, I don't mind a bit of handbags, a bit of arguing, because that's Man United when they were at the peak of their powers. That used to go on in the changing rooms. It shouldn't be any different for any team who have high standards and want to get promoted and want to be successful. And that's what in the back of my mind is like, do the people in charge, does Kyril, do they know that there's just something not quite right in that dressing room, and that what we need is somebody who's going to probably do what Johnson isn't really capable of doing, and that's shaking it up a little bit and getting stuck into them when things aren't good, and ultimately not standing for 6-0 defeats away from home against mid-table sides.
Well, I think a lack of leadership on the field has been a common thing throughout the whole course of the season, hasn't it? And even if you look at yesterday, we had Corey Evans on the field, who's our captain. He's supposed to be a leader and showed very little in that regard. Danny Bart's just come in. He's supposed to be a leader, and I think he probably is, but maybe it's very early days for him at the club, isn't it? But Lee Johnson seems to be a manager or a head coach who is really well in with his players, who is part of that extended group of players rather than that traditional manager who's going to rule with a little bit of fear as well as sort of coaching and managerial nous. And whether that's you go back to Lee Johnson's managerial record, and these runs that he has, these streaks that we've talked about before, they are a common theme of his managerial career, aren't they? And when things are going well, he rides that crest of the wave. Everybody seems to be happy and loving it and playing good football. It dips very suddenly, and he's been incapable now on a few occasions of picking us out of that and not letting one defeat not turn into a 3 or 4 game run. And it is such a young team. Yes, there's a couple of experienced players in there, but there is a young team. And really, like, that manager or head coach needs to be able to pick them up and actually kind of remove himself from that feeling of disappointment and give them a good welly sometimes. And you kind of need the manager to be able to do that. And like after the game on Saturday, Johnson was shell-shocked in his interview. He just looked broken. And you kind of go, it's going to be hard for him to come back from it. And, I'm really mixed emotions about it because I really wanted him to succeed. And I think, Christian Speakman talked earlier in transfer window about not making rash, knee-jerk decisions on signings based on 1 or 2 games. It was a long-term plan. The pieces were in place, and you ride out the results as long as the trajectory over the course of the season was going in the right direction. And whether this has been building in the background for a while, and that's the final straw, or whether it is a knee-jerk, like we don't know for certain, do we? But I'm hoping that it's a decision that has been building for a while and it's been talked about over the past weeks and months, and to have people as candidates lined up to speak to if and when they pull the trigger. Because if it's just a knee-jerk reaction to the 6-0, it kind of puts us right back to square one.
Yeah, it does, and this is a big call, isn't it, Craig? Like from the manager, the owner, even, because when you look at like what we've all sort of preached, Johnson needs a full season, and needs to, he was probably given the task, get us promoted, and he hasn't been given a clear run at it. He hasn't. He came in when he took the job. He came in at December time, by which point a lot of damage had been done by Phil Parkinson. This year, things have changed again, and he's been sacked, and I'm just that's where I feel for him, because he hasn't been given the time effectively to do it. But KLD though, the owner, this is a big call, isn't it?
It's the biggest one he's made so far. I think what people would argue is they would probably consider last season and the time he's had so far as sufficient time. I'm with you in that sense. I think you need a full season with your own players, and this was his team. But I think subsequently that's why he's ultimately paid the price and obviously lost his job, because this is his team and they've been battered on several occasions now. They aren't just one-offs. Perhaps if it was just the Portsmouth game in isolation, you maybe just look at the weather, you blame the conditions, whatever. If yesterday was 1-0, then maybe you can look past it. But it's the manner of some of these defeats that's left a really, really bad taste in people's mouths. What I would say ultimately is whatever we do now, with such little time left in the transfer window, it's going to take, I would say, a really brave person to come forward to say that they are capable of ultimately securing us promotion, because whoever comes in now, that's their remit. Basically, Lee Johnson was sacked because the board no longer trust that he will succeed in his objective. But with that in mind, they're going to have to come in and basically do what Lee Johnson did. They're going to have to manage somebody else's team. So what I wonder with this is, if it is the case that we flash forward a couple of weeks from now with whoever's in charge, if we get another good hiding somewhere away from home, or even if we have another off performance like Lincoln at the Stadium of Light, who are people going to point the finger at? Are they then going to point the finger at this new guy? Are they going to point the finger at the team? Because subsequently somewhere there is obviously something wrong. There is an underlying issue. At home, we're absolutely fantastic. We've had a couple of off days, but away from home, that's what we really need to sort out. That's the problem. If we could have, copy and pasted our results from home, we'd be running away with this league. But we're soft. We're absolutely soft. And what Martin said about Johnson, he looks a lone lost figure on the touchline, and like I said, I'm saddened by that, because I was one of those who really, ultimately when he was getting a lot of criticism, I nailed my colours firmly at the mast. I said he was the right man. Even walking out of the ground at Bolton, although I couldn't explain what had happened, I never seen this coming. And granted, it may have happened elsewhere in the ground. I sat on the far left-hand side of the goal, but there wasn't really many murmurings of people saying get him out or chanting his name, which again I don't know, I just find the whole thing peculiar. But now, ultimately, what Kyril's got to look to do is, whether it's short-term or long-term, if we don't get promoted, there's a lot of questions already about the ownership. And whether you agree with them or not, it's only going to get louder. If we do not get promoted this season, people are going to start asking questions again, and it's just very messy. And I think it could have been avoided. It really could have been avoided. But here we are again with a lot of uncertainty, and we're in the final straight now from here till the end of April. And I'm just starting to panic a little bit now, actually. I remember Dara McAnthony on our podcast previously last season, the Peterborough chairman, saying if you sack your manager halfway through a season, you're ultimately writing the season off. Now, I don't think we're at that level yet, because we're not far off the automatic spots, but I think a lot of people have probably lost faith over the course of the past few results.
I think it's an interesting appointment that we're going to make, because, Craig, you said that anyone coming in is inheriting somebody else's side, but in the current setup that we have, that head coach role is kind of interchangeable, because it's not the coach making signings, isn't it? It's Speakman and the recruitment team. And, that makes it a difficult appointment in a lot of respects, because a lot of managers probably aren't willing to work in that setup. And for a long-term project, as we've been talking about and we've been told about, to make a short-term appointment, it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? It seems to go against the grain of what we're actually trying to do longer term. But by sacking them, as you say, they are saying we need to get promoted this season, and whoever we bring in has to get us up. Now, whoever comes in, actually, I think there's an awful lot of good things. This isn't a situation where everything's crap and we have to rip it all up and start again. Whoever comes in just needs to make us tougher to beat away from home, and we'll actually be all right, because home performance has been good in the main, as you say, great on occasion. We've got a really good squad of players, I think, that we can add to over time, but we've got a nucleus there of a really good, promising side who can get better and better. So it's a great position for a new person to come in, but to get the right person who's not actually going to change that much, but just make us defensively solid, maybe get a bit more, change that role in the dressing room a little bit, where he does give a bollocking to them. Obviously, we don't know if he does or doesn't, but it doesn't seem as if he does. And most importantly, able to get the respect of the crowd immediately, which I think is a massive thing for any Sunderland manager. I think Lee Johnson had to try to earn that respect and didn't actually get there with a lot of people. But a Sunderland manager needs to manage the crowd as well as the players and the rest of the club. So getting that person who can do all of that, who's willing to work as that head coach and not as a traditional manager, it's a bit of a needle in a haystack job.
Do you think it's a fair argument in terms of whoever we appoint, that it might underwhelm a lot of people, because I'm kind of trying to cast my memory back now to the last manager that came in, that people not necessarily were blown away by, but perhaps instantly thought that this is somebody who can manage the situation. I think back to maybe Chris Coleman. His stock was quite high after doing very well at Wales, and people instantly thought, well, here's a guy who can get us out of this mess, and ultimately failed. I don't think Jack Ross was a name that perhaps inspired many. Phil Parkinson, again, the same. Even Lee Johnson. So I'm just wondering now, you look down the list of these potential appointments, realistically speaking, I think a lot of people have this idea. I've already got messages coming in now from friends saying, oh, we should get Warnock, we should get Big Sam, or anybody like that. And I mean, again, I just don't think that's possible at this stage. Whether it's going to be an internal appointment or anything like that, I don't know. But at this moment, you're talking about this need, this desire to manage the crowd. Whoever comes in, they're going to be under enormous pressure immediately, because even if they get, say, like an 18-month deal or anything like that, it's kind of like Johnson at the back end of last season. He ultimately failed. He got us to the playoffs, but people wanted him out straight away because, well, he didn't get us promoted. So is this a situation that we're going to potentially be revisiting maybe a couple of months from now? If we don't go up, whoever comes in, are we then going to be saying again, well, look, you've had 3 months, you've had 17, 18 games, you've failed, so now you've got to go. It's just a very dangerous situation, I think, at the moment. And
no, it is.
I think, to be honest, a lot of people will be looking at us now thinking they're going to fancy their chances to either catch up on us or ultimately that we're going to fall away. We need a new manager bounce instantly, put it that way.
I think it'll be a short-term appointment. I just don't see us appointing anybody beyond the end of the season because of the nature of Johnson going. Like, if this was still a case of, well, if we don't go up at the end of this season, that's all right as long as we go up next season, Johnson would still be here because you go, right, you just need to tweak the away games and get better at grinding results out away from home. And we're actually on the right path. So this, like, to me, sacking them says we're putting everything on getting promoted this season. Whoever we bring in has to do that. And you look at our next 5 games, they're all perfectly winnable games. I think we've got 3 at home and 2 away, or 3 away and 2 at home. But, we've got Doncaster, we've got Cheltenham. We've actually got a nice run of 5 games where they are perfectly winnable. And then we go to Wigan. And if we win those 5 games, we're back tracking over 2 points per game, which puts us in a really good position. So I think they've gone, with this run of games before we play Wigan, we've got to make a change now, but it's an immediate bounce that we need. It's not bring somebody in and things will develop long term and we'll grow and progress and all that stuff. It's actually come in, get results, and really, that's what we need between now and the end of the season.
Yes, I was just about to say that. I'm looking at the fixtures now, and the timing of it's pretty curious because you look at it and you think, well, let's say they didn't sack Lee Johnson. He's then got 3 very winnable games coming up, and again the dynamic shifts, and they're probably looking at it and thinking, how long can we afford to wait? Really, because they'll be looking at it and they'll be saying, well, you've got Doncaster at home next. If you bring a new manager in, what better way to announce them? Bring them in first game, playing a poor team at home where we're usually pretty good, and then you follow that up with 2 perfectly winnable away games. And then
you did think that when Lee Johnson came in, he started off against Wigan, didn't he?
Yeah. And then after those 2 perfectly winnable away games, you've got MK Dons, who are only just below us in the table.
Yeah.
So it's not. I don't actually think it's the next 5 games. I think it's like they're looking at it now and thinking, by the time we play MK Dons, we need to be in good form. Because after that, you've got Bolton, who are always a hard game for us at the Stadium of Light, always give us a good game, and then you've got Wigan. So the way that, in my mind, they were either going to have to do it now or not do it at all. Because when you look at those fixtures and the way they're laid out, you're only going to be able to, there's only a short window to give that new manager the opportunity to really, that new manager bounce you're talking about, to get that and to be in decent form and in decent shape by the time you play those really important games, because they're huge when you look at it. So that's maybe where Lee Johnson's been a little bit unlucky, is that obviously they've been, I would imagine they've been fairly unconvinced about him recently, which is why it's happened. But he probably knows that had he still been in the job, we'd have a good chance of getting 9 points from those games. But then you've got, again, while you were talking there, I was looking at a detailed version of the league table, and our away form under him this season has been shocking, and I just didn't realise it was truly that bad.
It's been unacceptable, yeah.
15 games, 5 wins, conceded 30 goals.
Yeah.
You ain't getting promoted with that. Well, look at the two teams above us, Martin. Wigan have won 10 of their 13 games away and lost once, and Rotherham have won 7 out of 13, I think, and they've only lost 3. So, and Rotherham, interestingly, have only conceded 5 goals away from home all season.
Jesus.
Where we've conceded 30. That's the difference at the minute. We're not quite good enough.
And it's interesting with Johnson, because when he first came in, I don't know if you remember, he took over at like 1 p.m. or something, didn't he, on the day of the Wigan game? And he put in completely a new system. Like, we've been playing 5 at the back under Parkinson, and he went straight away to a back 4 without any training sessions and all that sort of stuff, which you can say that's a confident manager, you can say that's an arrogant manager, you can say that's somewhere in between. And his approach to away games this season has almost bordered on the arrogant, in terms of, we're playing this system, we're not going to alter how we play based on who we're playing. We're doing well at home, we're blowing some teams away at home, so we're just going to try to do exactly the same thing away from home. And we need to be a little bit more pragmatic away from home, go, you know what, let's set up differently, let's be a bit more defensive, let's grind it out.
I fully agree with that, Martin. I mean, Gav, obviously you were there at Bolton, but I think you could tell after the first 10 minutes we were so sloppy in possession at the back. Torben Hoffman with some really terrible straight passes out wide, and they just pressed us and penned us in. And there was a good few occasions you think, we've got to change this now. And then when they scored, you think, right, okay, maybe let's kind of adjust now. And we just did not heed the warning. And I think that's where a lot of people's arguments have stemmed from about this having no plan B. It just seems when we're on form, especially at home, I think a lot of people would agree that we're probably the best side in the league. I mean, you look at the Sheffield Wednesday performance, for example. When we get going, we are very hard to stop. However, when somebody comes and aggravates us, comes and frustrates us, we don't really have an alternative game plan. And you look at some of the points that we've dropped in recent weeks. Wickham, you just need to hold on. Accrington Stanley, again, they're down to 10. Some of them are really, really silly and costly. And I think you are quite right in that sense, that it's just whoever comes in now, essentially, we're going to have to learn to play different ways. But I think with whoever comes in, ultimately, we can't do 4 at the back. We can't stop crosses. We are going to have to revert back to hopefully getting a lot of big men playing in defence, because ultimately when balls were coming in against Bolton, they just flooded the box. And it honestly, at times, it seemed like they had 5 more men than we did. They just attacked us by numbers every single time. And as soon as they went forward, you just knew they were going to score. However, at home, it's weird because that just doesn't happen.
And it's good, as a fan, that's frustrating that we haven't got a plan B. As a player, that must be demoralising if you're getting sent out doing exactly the same thing away from home and getting exposed like that. And yes, look, the players have got to take a lot of responsibility in this as well, especially for Saturday's game and the other away games that we've suffered heavy defeats upon. But as a player, if you're going out and if you're following the manager's instructions and he's leaving you wide open and he's setting you up like that, and you go out going, shit, we're doing exactly the same things we did at Rotherham and Sheffield Wednesday, that's not good for anybody. So, there's all these questions here, and it's kind of like, where does that philosophy come from? Is it Johnson's philosophy that he speaks about? Is it Speakman's philosophy? Because if that's Speakman's philosophy that Johnson's executing, the new fella's just going to do exactly the same.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be really interesting how this all pans out, because we can see what's needed. And I actually don't think we're that far off. But how we respond to this over the coming days and weeks and months is going to be quite intriguing to watch.
Who do you want, Craig? If I've got to pin it on you now, who do you want? Because it isn't an easy one to answer. Like, it isn't. We were talking about this on the Twitter space. There is nobody jumping off the page to me right now, and I don't know if that's just me.
I think realistically speaking, like I said, whoever's going to come in, I think may underwhelm people. That's not me being negative, because I'm typically Sunderland's biggest happy clapper, but I just think in respect to the names mentioned, online in particular, a lot of people are saying Sam Allardyce, a lot of people are saying Roy Keane and stuff like that, and I just cannot see characters and personalities of that particular ilk coming in and saying, yeah, okay, I'll come in and you do everything. Essentially, I report to you and I'm only responsible for picking the team and coaching them. So I'll be honest, I genuinely don't have an answer at this moment, because I really wasn't expecting Lee Johnson to go. I mean, like I mentioned beforehand, I think once you get past that 24-hour window and he hasn't gone at that point, you think, right, okay, we're going to roll the dice again and go into next weekend with a winnable tie. But the fact that Jamie McAllister's now gone as well, if we don't have an appointment in by the weekend, then it begs the question, who's going to take the team? So I honestly, I've got absolutely no idea. And at this moment, I know that there was a fake Twitter account which mentioned Duncan Ferguson. And I thought, Christ almighty, if there's somebody who would have put the fear of God into them after a 6-0 drubbing, it would be him. No. Give it a Bobby Saxton. Give it a Bobby Saxton.
I don't think that's such a ludicrous suggestion.
It's not, to be honest.
But be me.
Well, Bobby Saxton?
But give it a Bobby,
Saxton.
yeah.
Well, if Bobby wants it, he can have it. No, Duncan Ferguson, obviously, I don't think that's a ludicrous suggestion, given he was down to the final two to get the Everton job, and he's well respected as a coach. Everyone knows what he's like. He's very honest. He's very hard. These are all values we probably are missing right now. I mean, I wouldn't be totally underwhelmed by it. I can't say the positives in it, but I would say that would probably be underwhelming to some. I've seen John Terry linked, but he seems to get linked with every job. But again, not a particularly warm personality, but he is somebody who has won a lot, and winning mentality is big, particularly when you are the biggest club in League One. You know, having somebody at the top who's won things, who knows what it's like to win, who's been in those pressure situations, isn't the worst thing in the world. But any other suggestions?
I think it's reasonable to suggest that whoever we go for is probably going to be out of work. Because unless we
aren't going to Forest Green, we aren't going to MK Dons.
No.
That ain't happening. Nah.
No, because we essentially we don't have time to go and basically take somebody's manager off them. Not now. Short term, perhaps until the summer, if that's what they want to do. But I would immediately rule that one out, because I've seen a lot of people suggesting that we are going to, potentially knock on the door at MK Dons. But teams know they can drive a hard bargain with us. It was the same when we were interested in Coventry's manager. When Jack Ross left, compensation figures will just go through the roof. But unless somebody's, desperate to leave and maybe forces a team's hand, but it's definitely going to be somebody out of work, I would say.
And you look at, again, like that obvious need now that's been underlined by this decision to get promoted. And you go, okay, who is going to get you promoted? Who offers nothing's ever a guarantee, but who offers you the biggest chance or the best thing approaching a guarantee to get you up this season in however, 15, 16 games, however many we've got left. So you immediately go to somebody experienced, somebody who's done it before, who can just come in, get an impact, get us up, and then you review it at the end of the season, don't you, if we have gone up? So that kind of leads you to names like Warnock, Allardyce, McCarthy and stuff like that. But that
didn't say Grant McCann.
And that's, there's some that are probably slightly more appealing than others, but none of them are really appealing. None of them fit in with that long-term strategy that we look to have in place. So kind of go, is it somebody like Duncan Ferguson? What guarantees does he give you of getting up? None at all, because he's completely unproven. It's a really interesting choice to make. And as I say, you hope that there's some people lined up to talk to who they've identified as being somebody who can slot in to Lee Johnson's role. And Jermaine Defoe, who knows? Somebody come in, give it a boost. Maybe that's why it's clung on.
That is what we need.
I'm saying that very tongue in cheek, but it could be something completely left field, couldn't it?
Well, it could be somebody from abroad that's been mentioned too. That would suit the model of head coach, wouldn't it? There's a lot of teams in this country who've looked at Germany and brought in coaches from there. Long term, I could see that as a thing. I just think because it's definitely going to be a short term appointment of someone who's out of work. I think you're looking at a more limited pool, and it might not necessarily be someone who you'd expect to fit the mould of head coach in that bracket. But you look at the length of time left in the season. What's 3 months? We don't need somebody who's like an Allardyce, just say, for instance, Sam Allardyce has been mentioned because he's out of work, people love him, he's done a good job here before. You throw enough money at him and he'll come to League One, I'm telling you he would. But I actually think, generally speaking, that isn't the profile of manager that would suit what we need. But right now, as a club who are sort of like looking for that extra 15-20%, to go from being a third and fourth place team to a second or first place team, that might not be such a bad idea. He will organise you defensively, but at the minute, I just don't know. And I think over the coming days that'll obviously become a lot more clear to us, and we'll be there to react as it comes in. But yeah, cheers lads. I think we'll leave it there for now, as there isn't a lot more to go off really, other than that Lee Johnson is sacked. Hopefully by the time this drops and people listen to what we've had to say, there'll be more news. We will be going live on Twitter on deadline day, which is Tuesday. If you listen to this, I imagine Monday. I'm getting my dates mixed up. Yeah, if you listen to this on Monday, we'll be going live on deadline day on Twitter just to count down the last few hours of the transfer window and probably talk more about the managerial situation. Hopefully by that point there'll be some clear candidates and favourites for the job. And you can catch us over on the Roker Report Twitter page, Twitter Space Live. And obviously there'll be plenty of reaction over on rokerreport.com as the days progress to what's going on with the managerial situation. But yeah, cheers lads, thanks for joining us. Thanks Martin, have a good day. Nice and early where you are.
Cheers.
And Craig, get some sleep, mate. You look knackered.
It's just watching us at Bolton, isn't it? It takes it out of everybody.
Cheers everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.